Today we welcome Professor Michael Wise from the London School of Economics and Political Science, of which he was director, pro-director from 1983 to 85. Professor of Geography there from 1958 to 1983. President of the International Geographical Union from 1976 to 1980. Michael, welcome.
Thank you very much, Anne.
And I'm sure you have much that is wise to relate. Would you begin by telling me something of your background and what led you to become a geographer?
Well, it's a very difficult question, of course. I was interested in geography quite an early age, being brought up in Birmingham, England, a massive industrial city. I got interested in how it had come to be like it was. Curiosity, if you like, about the environment. My father was interested in local history, encouraged me, the school encouraged me. When I went to the University of Birmingham as an undergraduate, my teacher there, R.H. Kindrig, understood what I was interested in and encouraged me to study the local environment in some detail. In fact, I think I neglected my geomorphology, some aspects of the subject, which I regret in a way. But the advantage was that I was able to devote the time, my bicycle, my maps, 25-inch to the mile, and in a couple of years or so I think I visited every factory, and there are thousands of them in Birmingham, adjacent cities.
Can you give me an idea of the years we're talking about?
This was 1936, 38, years of when the Depression was still leaving its effects in Britain, when an important Royal Commission had been established, the Barlow Commission, looking into the causes of the great shift in population from north to south that was taking place, and the lasting effects of the industrial depression on urban life. And my work eventually found its way to that commission as evidence. Not very much geographical evidence was submitted, but mine was. And the maps are still available in the library at Birmingham and at the LSE. And they go, well, we were able to generalize them and analyze them and build up a picture of how that great industrial city had changed. It had, in fact, escaped the worst effects of the Depression. And we were able to test out then some of the emerging urban models of the time, Burgess and so on, against the picture of... And this gave me an interest in industrial location, which I carried forward steadily. Of course, the whole work which I was engaged on, big book was going to come out on the industries of Birmingham and the location problems. The war came.
The war, yes. Tell me about what the war...
There was only one option then. One had to join the army.
The army. At what age?
Well, in 1940 I joined up, I think. No, 1939 I joined up, but I was allowed a year off. They had so many people joining up, they hadn't got uniforms anymore. So I had effectively another year, and I finally joined in 1940. Having joined the army in 1939, they called me up in 1940. And that took me all over the Middle East, eventually to Italy, following the 8th Army.
In what branch?
Oh, in the army. First in the guns, then in infantry. So I walked up a lot of hills in Italy. And I got back to the University of Birmingham early in 1946. And my work was then well known because during the war in Britain, a large number of little organizations had sprouted, looking at the problems of bomb damage, lack of investment in cities, how we could redevelop and build new cities. And I was taken into the work of a group called the West Midlands Group on Post-War Reconstruction and Planning, a very long title. Essentially civic university, multidisciplinary. And we sat around there, and the geographical evidence was amazingly useful. We eventually produced a book called Conurbation, which was one of the early post-war
Yes.
planning studies. Perhaps a little too idealistic, not quite practical enough to have effect, but it's still useful.
What were its main sorts of themes? Was it something along the line of Ebenezer Howard, or was it?
Well, of course,
closer to
Ebenezer
right?
was one of the initiators of the ideal cities tradition.
Yes.
And one of our questions at that time was how far to that particular West Midland conurbation, how far the Ebenezer Howard new town solution
Idea. Yeah.
was appropriate. It proved to be very appropriate in the Greater London
Yes.
situation. It wasn't immediately adapted in the West Midlands, though new towns have since been developed there. But I, at that time, was not in favour of the Ebenezer Howard solution for the West Midlands,
Why?
on simple grounds that the geographical circumstances there, a conurbation, Birmingham and the Black Country together, of 2.5 million people at most, that given proper organisation and use of land, there was land within the conurbation, within the Black Country. There was land on the fringe of Birmingham, which could have been developed quite quickly without loss of amenity, without loss of first-class agricultural land. But at that time I was in favour of an expansive approach to the present city rather than the planting of new towns in the kind of city regions
So you wanted
solution that London had.
concentration rather than decentralization.
And my logic behind that was partly that land was available, partly the economics of a situation in Birmingham where a very large number of small-scale industries existed together, often in localized quarters, like the gun and the jewellery quarters that I wrote about, because of the advantages of linkage and co-location. And I think I was proved right in this by subsequent events. That, there wasn't the same drive to decentralise industry as there had been in the case of London.
So it was the economies of agglomeration
That's
rather
right.
than scale
That's right.
that
These
were
were important.
Yes.
The linkage economy. I wrote a little bit about them. But I found that work, it was really financed by the Cadbury family,
Private
the chocolate
foundation.
people who were Quakers, you know, and in the best Quaker tradition, established the most efficient industry they could, but used the revenue profits derived from that to good works and good causes. And this group was one of the...
Fascinating.
Yeah.
The chocolate factories in France that have sponsored some things.
Cadburys always have, still have
I
this
didn't realise
great
that.
tradition.
So now we're talking 40s.
And they've been very helpful to geographers and saw the value of geographical
Cadburys.
studies. They're
Yes.
still being helpful to us. But it's another story.
Nothing wrong with that.
Anyway, I was working away on all this, and one day I happened to lead a field excursion through the coalfields of the West Midlands on the occasion of a meeting of the British Association for the Advancement of Science. And on that field excursion were three well-known geographers: Dudley Stamp, as he then was, became Sir Dudley Stamp later, R.O. Buchanan, the economic geographer, and Sidney Wooldridge, great geomorphologist. And after the excursion, they asked me if I was interested in going to London. A job was available at the London School of Economics. S.H. Beaver, the economic geographer, had gone to the University of Keele. They wanted an economic geographer.
This is the 50s now.
This is 51.
51.
5 years teaching at London. So I went to LSE, and that was a major turning point in my academic life. While Birmingham had been splendid, stimulating, local applied activities, invigorating, I'd also done a lot of work from documentary sources on the evolution of a city, its history, the 18th century story, which I thoroughly enjoyed and never finished. Going to London was quite a traumatic experience. 2 points of view. One, at LSE, the atmosphere was quite different from that of a provincial university, non-departmentalized, highly interdisciplinary. Social sciences exclusively, economists, economic historians, anthropologists, political scientists, all interested in what one another was up to all meeting every day, the common room, talking away. A number of flourishing interdisciplinary groups to which one could belong. No question about what geography was or was it important. You were there, involved,
Yes.
and they wanted contributions straight off, so it was stimulating. Then they offered me the chance to develop a new course on industrial geography, economic geography of industry. That was a very rewarding experience. Very good students came along, and now they're all over the world doing industrial geography,
Yes.
much greater depth of theory and practice than I would ever have been able to do. Marvellous.
But it was the halcyon days of industrial location, wasn't it?
That's where it
50s
was
and
pinned on.
60s.
It was pinned on industrial location.
Yes.
There wasn't an awful lot written by geographers of depth. I remember relying a lot at the time, developing this new course, on the work of Hoover,
Yes.
whose applied work in the United States during the war years was very important.
And Ullman had that as a
Well,
central
yes, he
interest.
came into it a bit later from my own personal point of view, though I know he'd been working too. Immediately it was Hoover who was more important. And of course Walter Izard,
Yes.
who I got to know. And the theoretical side was built into the course. We attempted to relate this.
So in fact, that could be one of the sources of regional science.
Well, of course, yes, though I rather, having been very interested in the early days of regional science, and having been in close touch with a group of other scholars in Britain, we felt, we founded instead a thing called the Regional Studies Association. And that was more akin to my interest in the way in which regional science developed, which became highly theoretical, the models.
Simulation.
The regional studies. We tried to keep this in touch with real questions. National, international interest, questions of the effect of public policy on regions, on urban development, urban life, location of industry policy, was it a success or not? And the Regional Studies Association still goes quite well.
I'd really like you to get into that. How was it that the theories of industrial location, which were suggested, did or did not work?
Well, I mean, the world is a very complex place.
Yes.
And
Did any of it work?
I think the people have said I'm a positivist. Have been, I suppose, very largely.
Some of my best
But
friends.
all right, I know. The theories were great guide, great help. Testing out Weber as we did. You can do it by various means, a very sophisticated way now. A lot of that was very useful, guide to understanding. Then, of course, I found Lersch, a very, very stimulating book indeed. Wrote a long review, built that into our teaching. And there's a good deal in Lersch, which geographers haven't yet fully developed, I think.
They have just-
Greenhut had a go too. He was made some useful contributions. But a lot of my people have developed behavioural approaches. And there, of course, is part of the answer to your question. The partial relevance of the theoretical, classical theoretical side.
But
I think the behavioural side has produced some very useful understandings and insights.
Perhaps, yes, but in a historic context, there was a period in the post-war, in the 50s and even into the early 60s, where central place theory was a kind of catechism for applied geography, location of schools or hospitals or industries or what. And you must have been very intimately involved with that.
Yes.
Have you seen any cases where it really worked, or cases where it dramatically did not work?
Well, it's been tried. Take the case of the Netherlands, where it formed the basis for the establishment of cities in their reclaimed polders, Delta plan, Indian planning. Perhaps overestimated the value of central place approach at times. Sudhir Mali's here. He'll discuss that question with you. He studied it in great detail with relevance to Indian urban planning, regional planning. We've tested it out in Britain, looked at the pattern as it has built up, as it has developed, just as Christaller did in South Germany, and one can see that there is force in the theory. But it again, regions differ, areas differ, physical circumstances, social, industrial life is different.
Yes.
No, I found it a very helpful guide to thinking and analysis, a tool that one can employ.
So urban industrial economic geography was your primary focus, and the people who helped you, who were the most important people, apart from the books you mentioned of Hoover and Lersch, who were the people of your generation that were more enthusiastic for that line, urban industrial?
Well, you see, Stamp and Buchanan, who are the heads of that institution, the geography department, were both very Catholic in their outlook. Buchanan in particular saw the value of a strongly disciplined economic geography. His own work reveals that. Discipline based essentially in economics, economic history, as well as in geography. So that they were immensely supportive and helpful in developing what was then the only course of its kind in Britain, and producing new people. A little bit later, of course, I mean, that course already began experiments in quantification before the great wave of quantification and before the great wave of Haggett and Chorley. We were already thinking along those lines. Haggett and Chorley came along and picked up these ideas and spread them, disseminated them very splendidly, I think admirably in every respect. And they remain very good friends, Haggett in particular.
Is there any distinction between, is there much cooperation between the London School of Economics geography tradition of urban industrial geography and the Cambridge, Bristol axis?
Not now, no, it's lapsed, but for a time we used to organise a seminar with the people of Bristol and Cambridge, a postgraduate seminar. That's lapsed for one reason, partly because I think our graduate schools grew in size and became sufficient unto themselves. There was sufficient diversity in them. It's a pity in a way. It ought to be
a powerhouse there.
Redeveloped, but the London-Bristol axis was very strong at that time. But the other, I did want to mention one other point about LSE, and that was the change from working in a very good, happy provincial university to working in a centre which already had a very strong international reputation. The difference was almost charismatic, you see. Stamp had this great reputation and brought students to LSE from all over the world, especially at that time from Southern Asia, India.
And
the Indian subcontinent. Less now, unfortunately, for financial reasons, come from India, Pakistan.
Who funded those trips?
Those days, they were able to get money from various sources, including the British Council, various overseas aid sources. And some of them were able to come on their own funds.
So coming to LSE then began, I suppose, your international career.
Yes, I think that's true. There's a break in that.
How did that
opened up new vistas in the first place. You found all these splendid overseas students wanting their supervision, advice, discussion. One learned from them problems of their own universities, their own schools of geography, problems of regional planning, urban development, industrial location they were studying. And that was marvellous. I thoroughly enjoyed that, and of course one meets these students now at conferences like this. Renews acquaintance, and they keep in touch with me. But then there were the opportunities to, the IGU itself, Stockholm Congress, 1960, I was invited to chair an economic geography session or two. And that began to put me in touch with some of the figures on the international scene. William Olsen,
you met him.
well, a splendid,
Marvelous.
still going strong. Julian Sauschkin, Moscow, Chauncey Harris, Chicago, Gunnar Arpi, Sweden, the German economic geographer. And one found ourselves in communication on reports, exchanging off-prints and publications. And that was really marvellous.
Were you in the Commission on Applied Geography?
No, never,
No.
never.
That was assembled in Stockholm.
Never, it was, yes. No, I remained an economic geographer in this sense and never joined that commission. But the IGU involved me more and more. Stamp was a helpful influence there. Of course, we had to prepare for the 1964 Congress in London.
Yes.
And I was chairman of the programme committee, so there was correspondence with geographers all over the world. And one found out more of what was happening in other countries, in Latin America or in Africa. And that was a great experience too, running that conference. And one went on from then to become a member of the executive committee and eventually president of the IGU. And for me, the IGU is one of the essential institutions for geography.
Why? What does it do?
Undoubted. Well, it represents for our subject a principle which I think is undoubtedly one of the great principles, the internationality of science. If we cease as a subject to involve ourselves in international discussion, international exchange, communicating the results of our research worldwide, arguing with people with whom we may or may not agree. International is absolutely fundamental in the modern world, the world as it will be. And I think we must uphold that.
Well,
And there's a cost in upholding it. And the cost is giving time to people from other countries. Sometimes taking one's mind off local issues, national issues, onto international issues. I think that's very important, and the IGU, while I've been associated with it, has grown in number of countries. We now have over 90 countries. There are more yet to join. But we've been bringing into this circle of discussion and dissemination people from more and more environments, more and more backgrounds. Now, the achievement, and I will speak of it as an achievement, which most pleased me in all this, was the successful outcome of all the negotiations over the re-membership of China. We were able to bring China back. Well, now here is a country that should never not have been.
Yes,
And
yes.
now China is here at this conference as a full member. And that really gave me great pleasure.
That's wonderful. You think it's doing it as effective a job in promoting international communication as it could?
Well, I think it could do better, and the present executive committee is thinking of ways by which it could do better. But I find great pleasure in recording the fact that there are 42 commissions and working groups. Not all of them equally successful, it's true, but the majority doing a very good job. Meeting regularly, producing books, papers, I hope increasingly in the future developing good research programs. I think this is the need now. Geography is a very good teaching subject, very good descriptive work. It's got to be more forthcoming in its approach to the development of research and presenting its research clearly to other scientists. But IGU can be very helpful in that respect. But this IGU experience was not the only international. I've had great pleasure in other. I found myself, why I don't know, on the University Grants Committee for Hong Kong. There was a splendid old university. Needed a bit of new life. There was some money for it. We had to found a Chinese university in Hong Kong, and then a polytechnic. Now this took me out to the Far East a lot.
Yes.
And I could renew acquaintance with friends in Japan, which I'd previously visited. Lots of friends there. Studied the Japanese experience. And on my way back to Britain, stop in India, Bangladesh, renew acquaintances there. So this was quite a marvellous experience, followed by an invitation which I think Walter Mansard must have engineered to serve on various committees of the United Nations University in Tokyo. There the task was presenting geography, not by that name, but geographical problems and approaches, and securing the involvement of geographers in a number of their programs, particularly those which Walter directed brilliantly on natural resources and natural resource development. And I think this led me to shift my interest a bit for a time into natural resources, away from manufacturing industry. But that too was a very rewarding experience. And the United Nations University was able to link with IGU in the shape of a number of IGU commissions and promote joint activities, such as those on mountain regions, the coastal development studies in Southeast Asia, and others, all to this ability that Walter had to draw together the geographers and the United Nations University in its developing phase. I hope very much that will continue.
Good.
But these were all great international experiences. Meanwhile, one could always go back home to LSE and arrive home with pleasure. And there was the same school, vigorous, demanding, and students waiting at the door. Without students, academic life is nothing to keep.
Teaching was important for you.
Of course, absolutely fundamental.
And now, what is your present research interest?
Well, at present, I've got three main. I'm retired now from LSE for a year. I have three duties, mainly. One is the continuing chairmanship of a committee of the Department of Transport in Britain. It's a committee on the landscaping of trunk roads. And we advise the Department of Transport on the alignment of new routes for roads, motorways, bypasses, and on their landscape treatment. And I think that's work which is a great joy. A lot of field work is involved. And I think we can claim that the road environment of Britain is a little better than it might have been. Had this interdisciplinary, geographers are strongly represented on it, this interdisciplinary committee not been able to influence the work of engineers and road designers. Secondly, I chair a body called the Governors of Birkbeck College in London. Birkbeck College is a college for evening students who work during the day, study during the night. Very vigorous college, over 150 years of history. Currently it is the London Working Men's College, and I'm chairman of their governors. We have great problems getting enough money to keep the teaching and research going. Financing of part-time students is a difficult problem at the moment. I think they should have much more resources devoted to them. Indeed, that we ought to be thinking much more about the whole problem of continuing education.
Continuing education.
And not just paying lip service to it, but
really
putting more resources into it. Some splendid students at Birkbeck. And then I go on supervising graduate students. You will still write a few papers. You'll find one in next November's Geographical journal.
Wonderful.
So I keep my academic work going.
That's wonderful.
Strong. These are great joys in life, to have tasks to do and be able to
Well,
get on
with
with
that
them.
very happy note, I want to thank you so much for this interview.
Great
and
pleasure.
I
It's
hope
always a
that-
pleasure to talk to you, Anne.
I hope that the IGU can fulfill your dream for what it should be doing. Thank you.